Information technology is our last presentation today.
Thank you, Director Carter. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry to see everyone left when I got here, but I have the Planning Commission to entertain. We'll take a little bit of time to go through our slides. If you have any questions, just interrupt and we'll do the best. A couple of my team members are here with me. We have Layla Lehman, who is our Chief of Staff and Director for Administrative Services. Chris Harrington, our Fiscal Director, and Lawana Gibson, our Program Manager. So they helped us out, so if you guys put some questions to me, if I can't answer it, I'll ask them for help, okay? This is our mission, vision, and values. This is a slide that we use at the beginning of every meeting just to give context as to who we are and what we are about. I won't read all of it, but what I want to mention is the values piece of innovation and excellence, customer focus, accountability and credibility, respect and inclusion, efficiency and safety. And we start our meetings, we have, for instance, our town hall meetings. Our employees go through the slide, and our employees and team members talk about the values or highlight a particular value that guide them in a particular effort or initiative, just to reinforce the values to our team members. Next slide, please. I don't know what you know about BCIT, but what this slide shows are our services grouped into public-facing services, core IT services, city employee services, and administration. And I want to highlight a few things that are relatively new for us. One, the broadband initiative down in the first column. That's something that's new. And most people don't realize that the 311 call center falls under BCIT as well. Next slide, please. This is our organization chart. Didn't want to say much about this, but I can tell you this team is fabulous, and we are working hard to improve every day. One of the things that we actually do, we've instituted root cause analysis functionality such that when there's a mistake, there's an issue, we have a specific trained group that goes in, identifies the root cause, and literally, and I mean literally, figures out what we need to do to improve, and we track those improvement initiatives along the way. We have meetings where monthly we go through all of our metrics because we want to make sure we're able to measure the services that we provide and quantify the results of what we do. Next slide, please. I will not go through all of these, but just as sort of a few things that we want to highlight. One, you may or may not know, but we, as part of the Broadband Digital Equity Project, have connected over 11 recreation centers to city fiber. We have a service optimization project. This is a project where, if you think about how we are organized in Baltimore City, historically, every group had their IT, certainly the larger ones at least. Through cost optimization or service optimization, we combined DGS, HCD, and DOT and brought them into IT. And the infrastructure services are owned by IT, and the application services, and we're going to talk a lot about applications today, are co-managed between or matrix between BCIT and the actual owning organization, DOT, HCD, or DGS. They have dual reporting relationships. We did that because we found that we don't have the discipline and the process and procedures and the consistency across the enterprise to manage IT effectively. This gives us better alignment, better attention to detail, and our ability to avoid things like ransomware and stuff like that. Next slide. So this is a budget overview. Not going to talk much about this, but we have 161 FTEs, and you can see our services. The first one is the administration service. The next is application service, that's 803. 311 is Service 804. The Broadband and Digital Equity Project is 873. City Watch is 757. And the Information Security and Infrastructure is 805. Next slide, please. So we were asked to put together a slide regarding assets. And what we decided to do, when you talk about assets to IT, you can really kind of get into the gnats behind in terms of what you can count and what you should or shouldn't count. And we've got some ways to go to properly take groupings of IT assets, categorize them appropriately, and then cost them out. So let me give you an example. If you look at an application, let's just say Workday. Workday has associated with it multiple servers, multiple databases, multiple programs. We can take that type of designation, here's an application, assign all the different application components to it and say, this is an asset. We can also count, here are some of the counts that you can see here, servers, storage, backup storage, accounts, et cetera. We have those kind of counts, but we have to define an asset in a way that's meaningful to us such that we can manage the cost of IT and the services that IT provide. And by the way, just go back one slide. We do not own the telephony. That is owned by the Comptroller's office. They own the telecom and the telephony between our computer systems and our phone systems. Okay? So we're talking about recently completed projects. This is the City Watch replacement camera project. This, prior to us, we didn't have any life cycle replacement of City Watch cameras. We have roughly 800 City Watch cameras in total, but we didn't have them on a replacement cycle. So the last several years, we've been putting them on, we've been replacing a number of cameras. We have 312 cameras that we replaced. You'll see another slide later on about the remaining that we have to replace. Now that we have all the cameras up to date, we can say in a very definitive manner, and we can look to allocate funds appropriately, here are the investments we need so that we can continue to keep these cameras up to date. We had an additional appropriations from City Council, $1 million for expansion, which we're working with BPD on, and then another $1 million for the infrastructure enhancements for the City Watch cameras, the servers, the switches, the routers, those sorts of things. For the infrastructure piece, we should be finished by May, and we're working with BPD on the actual expansion piece. Next slide. You can't talk to IT unless you talk about storage. This is a typical IT storage upgrade that we do on a periodic basis. And those things are really about buying assets in the true definition of physical assets to store anything from all of your emails, your backups, our backups, as well as system data. Next slide, please. Intune. We are very proud of this project right here. And the capabilities that this does for us are enormous. This allows us to manage assets. By assets, I'm primarily focused on devices, your laptop, your desktop. It can be used for phones. We don't own the phones. We got to work with the Comptroller's office for that. But it allows us, like, let's say if your laptop was stolen, we can find that laptop and make sure that whomever stole it can't use it. So this gives us those capabilities to manage our computers, phones, and laptops remotely and do more things with them. Next slide. And then this is really a typical, we have to go through the life cycle just as I talked about with respect to City Watch cameras. We do that also for switches, routers, and other infrastructure components. Next slide. So projects in progress. I mentioned earlier that we had roughly 300 or so cameras that we had on a replacement cycle. These are the remaining cameras that we have, and these should be done by May of this year. At that point in time, we will have a 7-year replacement with 3.5-year increments for half the assets and 3.5 years in the next half. And then we'll be able to budget the replacement of those cameras on a consistent basis in addition to the maintenance of the infrastructure. Next slide. This is the Genetec clearance. And basically what this does, it just really allows BPD to manage the cameras it's a database that allows BPD to manage cameras from homeowners, businesses, whereas today they kind of go through a manual process to request that information. This is on the cloud. They can go through a very streamlined method to access and request information from cameras that are part of that program. Next slide, please. Well, that's me. I apologize for that. Now, this one here, I'm going to give you a little bit more background than probably what you might want to hear. Today, you had challenges with the wireless infrastructure, right? Let me give you some background as to what happened with that. Now, the last thing I wanted to do was come in here and wireless still be down, okay? let me just say that. We have firewalls. Firewalls protect all of the incoming and outgoing traffic. It allows us to block traffic. It allows you, if you travel, to say if you're in a foreign country, here's access to our systems. We check the IP addresses. We tried that cutover 3 times. 3 times. Now, some may say, well, that's a bad thing. I say it's the greatest thing, because to do that, every organization in Baltimore City that has IT systems and assets had to be a part of testing. And this work occurs in the wee hours of the night. It starts at 11:59 p.m. and goes through 6 a.m. with a point of go, no go. So when we tried this twice before, it didn't work. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, we had to roll back the changes. And the next day, when all of you came to work, all of you, nothing occurred because things were as normal. So that is success. So today, we had a few issues, nothing major, but we're talking BPD, DPW, DGS, all these agencies working together in concert to do this change. And having the fortitude to say, if it's not right, let's roll back. So again, we had the issues today. I'm glad we got them resolved quickly. But this is something that shows the maturity that we've gained over the years, not only to manage ourselves with good judgment, but also the broader Baltimore City government. Because historically, when I first got here, people were making routing changes during the day and bringing segments of the network down and looked at me like, what's the problem? So we've come a long way with that. So 225 project requests. So I would say over the last several years, I've talked to you all about infrastructure. Primarily since ransomware, we had to improve our security, our infrastructure, switches, routers, and all the software that manage that. We now spend most of our focus on applications. The first one is the Unifier application. This is pretty much the construction management tool that replaces CM14 that you may or may not be aware of. It's used primarily by DGS, DOT, and DPW. There are others use it as well, I think Rex and Parks, et cetera. This puts them on one platform and allows us to but gives them the flexibility to have business unit level functionality, but also gives the enterprise the flexibility to roll up numbers and forecasts for inventory, for forecasting of capital, with integration into Workday. It gives us those capabilities that we don't have in one platform. And prior to this project, again, how we did things in the past, we were approaching it as each agency was going to do their own thing on different platforms with the same product. And we just don't do that anymore. Next slide. Permitting. Permitting is a challenge for us. We are working and partnering with HCD. This project has kicked off and is scheduled to go live at the end of the year. And this is a well-needed project in addition to some of the process changes that need to be made. And we've got a new, again, historically, we had homegrown systems to do this functionality. We brought off-the-shelf systems that are in the cloud that are more flexible than what we've been able to provide in the past. Next slide. Tax modernization. We are working right now on packaging up a project to replace our aging mainframe-based tax system. This is something that is desperately needed as well. We're hoping to hit the BOE by mid-February. It's something that we have promised the City Council and worked with finance on, and we're ready to go with this. It's just a matter of getting through the funding and approval processes, which we've gotten through, and now submitting it for approval. This will be a multi-year project. Next slide. And then this one, the CAD replacement. Our CAD system is over 20 years old. We have not found the full set of dollars for this as of yet. We're working with BPD and Fire to hopefully secure this, but this is something that is well needed too. We've done a pre-study that gave us all the requirements. We just have to pull together each of the business units to partner and say, yeah, we need it, then secure the funding for it. And I know, Chris, we've been working with Kristen and your team and others to see if we can use other types of financing to get money for this. Next slide. So in conclusion, you all's famous words for today, I take it. Next slide. We just put some of the critical issues that are facing IT. And I think certainly protection against the cybersecurity related threats. We learned a lot from our ransomware attack. And I can tell you, I'm not saying we won't get attacked again, which we do all the time, but our defenses are a lot much stronger today than they were the past. But that's still a critical issue facing us given the sophistication that the bad guys have. And one of the areas that we need to do more, I think, focus on is probably some of our OT systems as opposed to some of the IT systems. By OT, I mean operational technology like our SCADA systems, as an example. Updating unsupported infrastructure and aging applications, another need. We historically haven't invested. This group here has given us, invested over the years, has changed that trajectory of investments in IT. I'm going to ask you every year to continue to do that and to really think about we can show the benefits, we can show and prove that we can execute, and we want you and continue to ask for your support. Investments in emerging technologies that increase efficiencies, cost savings, and better serve city residents. This year, we'll be rolling out a new web presence that's targeted for May. We will have a chatbot, and we had the payment system go live last year. If you recall, on the year in review slide, we saved over $4.4 million to our customers because of that system, because we get a lower rate that we pay for transactions that we pass through. And then just a better understanding of our data and our processes. We have systems, and our challenge here in Baltimore is we have systems. Historically, we have not put the care and feeding into them to get the benefit out of them. And so it's a paradigm shift, because in today's modern world, you just can't put a system and just walk away from it. You gotta, you gotta work to get benefits out of it. And when you do that, you begin to understand your data, you begin to understand your business processes, and how you can make those processes more efficient. And with that, I'll ask, are there any questions or comments or concerns?
Thank you so much. Dr. Ryer, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Director. That was awesome. Two questions. One, when your improvements accrue savings in operations or capital, who do they accrue to? Is it the client agencies? Is it the city as a whole? Who captures that financial benefit?
Good question. One, I would say we are in our infancy in identifying savings. I can tell you that for sure. And we go for a business case that has saving. The projects that we're doing, the business cases have savings that can accrue in many different places, depending. So for instance, on the tax system, there are potential labor savings. There are also savings because of the timing of revenue coming in or the completeness of data. So we haven't gotten to the point where we say, dollar for dollar, this dollar saved, it goes here, here, here. We, from an IT perspective, have championed that some of the savings be returned to IT so that we can continue the investment. Not all of them, but some. But that's something more of a work in process that we're going through right now. Just frankly, getting business cases is tough in the city sometimes, just because. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you for that. The second one is, during COVID, the entire city shifted its permit system to online. And as you noted, the HCD one was sort of broken even then, and still is. But I have a question about land records. We have shifted the majority of our land records online, but still maybe 20% are not. PUDs, subdivisions, things like that. Do you know, is there a protocol among cities in the United States or North America or something for how we transition to digital land records?
So I may have to find out more about the specific question, but when you talk of land records, are you talking to what we have in our GIS system, or are you talking the layers associated with what's in our GIS system?
I'm talking about the documents that support the value of land in the city. So an ordinance or an action by this commission, for example. Now, we capture those digitally now, but there are many in the past that are still on paper.
Okay. I think I understand.
Other agencies.
So you're talking about the historical land records, not necessarily current.
Correct, primarily historical.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, Director. I do know that we have looked at on multiple occasions what we can do to digitize the historical data, including, documents associated with land records themselves, but we just haven't been able to find a sponsor for that effort. We can't just, we need partnership to do these types of projects. We actually got to a point where we looked at not only the digitization of those records, but the workflow systems, and we saw some pretty good ones that would allow you to, query and get the historical data that you need. And what we need to do is partner with someone to set a scalable solution such that other agencies or other record types can be added, and the cost of adding those other records can be borne by, that agency. But we just need that sponsor to work with us to get the initial system, and maybe two systems together. But I understand what you're asking for now, and that's what we we've tried to do, but we just haven't had any takers. And if you're willing to say, hey, I'll do it, we'll gladly work with you.
I jump off of that. So, I mean, so the issue that the director was mentioning impacts land use attorneys. So like, I think Cross Keys development was the first PUD in the city in the 1970s, 60s. So, but even today, although it's being updated, but today, if you wanted to figure out what you can build in Cross Keys, you got to go, someone,
Yeah.
lawyer, paralegal has to go down and look at the records and pull out these big sheets.
Yeah.
Or get planning staff to do it. So they'd be a natural constituency to pay for better access. And so I guess one thing I was thinking about is their thought about that sort of thing. That would be one area. Permitting reform, developers would also be happy to pay a surcharge or more to have a better permitting system. So is that in the purview or their thoughts about that sort of effort to help defray the cost of the upgrades?
I mean, we can certainly work with you on that. We've kind of talked around this issue, just as you mentioned it, Justin, and the options of it it had been talked about prior to me getting here, and we just haven't found anyone to really partner with us at the expense of their current priority to focus on it. But I understand what you're asking, and we did start to look at it. And like I said, I personally was involved in looking at some of the vendors, but we just, like, the support just went away. Literally, at the time, we had Health was actually going to say, we'll be the guinea pigs to build that first set, and then it just died. So if I can work with you, if we can get someone, we'll be glad to take on that effort. Because I agree, it's well needed. And once you get a system in, and if it's scalable, then others can bring different types of records on. And, because the scanning piece is somewhat commoditized at this point in time. It's not, it's just scan it, and it's the indexing and workflow. And there's some pretty good tools out there.
Yeah, thinking out loud, I mean, even charging, 'cause I know we kind of charge for the copy sometimes when you can go look at the archives for housing permit records, but if we could charge the actual cost of scanning, somehow figure out what the true cost is, which might be more, but it'd be worth it to have a better system. Because it'd be spin-off benefits. I'm thinking about like if a firefighter was going to go in a building, if they could quickly figure out the permit floor plan records, that'd be helpful for them. Much less it'd be helpful for future investors trying to develop a building and say, oh, what's the records say, and so what, or appraisers and those sorts of things. So.
We can dust off our papers and see what a reasonable estimate is, and come back to you or you, Justin, and if we can get some partnerships to help with that, we'll gladly take it on. Okay?
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. So any questions from the commission, Commissioner Collins?
No, I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner McCoach?
No questions at this time.
Commissioner Allen?
No question, it's just thank you to your agency and all the people who work for you, because I have had to use their resources numerous times. Even though I'm a retired city employee, I've had to use you all numerous times, and you all have come through in the clutch many times, so thank you.
Well, thank you. And I can tell you, we've worked those values that we talked about. There's a customer focus value in there, and that's what we want to do. So I'm glad that without having to escalate something, that you got the service that you need and you're pleased. So thank you. I'll pass that on.
And I'll give you an example. I worked part-time as a contact tracer for the health department, and on Christmas Eve 2020, Workday was implemented for, I guess, the entire health department, but definitely for the people who I was working with. And it was new, so a lot of things didn't work, and it affected paydays. It was Christmas Eve. Your staff they were there working, answering calls, helping people so that they could get paid. So thank you.
I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor?
Also co-sign, I appreciate the intentional focus the department's made in the past couple of years to be thinking proactively about partnerships and ways to be customer focused. In that vein of thinking proactively, has there been any thought, or is it possible to look at coordination or partnership with other entities of the state or other local agencies. So I'm thinking, for example, you mentioned the CAD system upgrade. It strikes me that in theory, state police, MTA police, and UMB police, the state general services have police. So like, in theory, they'll have a CAD system. Could we combine resources there and have one system that's unified, or on licensing issuing? So like the state, we issue licensed housing and finance. The clerk of the court issues business licenses. Liquor board issues licenses. So similarly, could we have one unified program that, even though it's clerk of the court's a separate entity, could we actually talk about collaborating and saving?
Yeah, so what we've done, not quite to the extent that you outlined here, we've ensured that the systems that we actually kind of have the same systems, the Genetec systems, and we work to make sure that they can communicate well with one another. A good example of that is the new towing system that we're putting in place. It's a towing system that's used by Anne Arundel County and Baltimore County. And so it's a SaaS, software as a service system, and a resident could look in their systems and find their car across many jurisdictions, as opposed to, I can only look at Baltimore City, I can look at surrounding counties, et cetera. So we haven't done quite that type of partnering. We do it, but it's more on a case-by-case basis. And but we do make sure that we are at least consistent with our neighboring governments for the things that we do. And we rely on each other much. For instance, even you guys just had DPW in here. Their new billing system they're looking to bring in. They're working with Baltimore County on that. And the guy that works, the CIO for Baltimore County, is Mike Freed. If you guys know him, he was at Health. And so, we collaborate as necessary on those kinds of things.
It's helpful. I think it's something, just kind of occurred to me, but I think we should brainstorm or think about that. Even with the school system itself, we can and should do more, I think, in jointly procuring things, but even on the county, so like one permitting system, just to save the cost of everything. I know it's,
Yeah, we'll need some help on that, because I can tell you from my perch, sometimes it's just tough getting agencies internally to work together, and we all
Good point.
We all know that, but let alone some of the other areas. But I will say, for instance, schools, they have their own implementation of Workday. I think Baltimore County is implementing Workday, so we're doing the same things, but people, that dependency, they only want it when it's advantageous to them.
Councilman Costello?
Thank you. No questions. Todd, I just want to, again, as I do every opportunity I get, thank you and commend you for the incredible work that this department has done. This is a very stark contrast to the BSIT that existed prior to ransomware, and I do believe that's because of your leadership and the team that you've put around you. So thank you and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Horn?
Just want to congratulate you on the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Just one question. When I was kind of looking at the slides and kind of focusing on your public-facing services,
Okay.
particularly your digital equity, broadband, all those things, kind of working with the rec centers and stuff like that. In this upcoming budget with your, I guess, the 7 projects and the $42 million that you're asking for, I didn't see any projects really focused on that in years past. You had wiring for public housing developments and things like that. And so I was just kind of wondering the prioritization thought process of not including that many of the public facing projects that you have in the past.
Good question, and I'll answer it in a couple ways. Broadband and digital equity is funded by ARPA, and it also has funding from HRSA, but please don't ask me what that acronym means. And there are some state funds as well, and we got that initiative late last year, like August of 2023, and since then we've been running uphill and are actually at least on the flat ground now, trying to go downhill with the work that we're doing for broadband and digital equity, which includes not only the rec center deployment of broadband services, but senior centers, public areas, as well as public housing. And those are the things that we're focusing on. And so what you will see in the future are the incremental costs that we need to sustain the infrastructure that we put in the ground for the broadband and digital equity work. So that's something that you'll see more and more of in the future once we kind of get through the cost to maintain and cost to expand broadband. Regarding the other part of that, we didn't, I don't know for any particular reason, we do have a new website that we're working with, which is customer facing, as well as Unifier has a huge customer facing piece as well. And so to that end, we had to change a lot of our thinking because we weren't as externally focused as some of the other agencies across Baltimore City. And that has caused us to have to rethink our strategy for digital, the Facebook, the social media tools, and how we can get interactions between customers and us through those tools. We're doing that with 311. Web services, making sure that our websites are accessible and meet all the accessibility requirements and are designed in a way that anyone can go in with a common format across all of Baltimore City and easily find the information that they need. And so, didn't highlight that, apologize for not doing that, but we are, and by just doing that kind of work, it puts us in the customer eye. So when we do that work, we actually go out and get feedback from customers. We get focus groups. We do surveys. We bring them in to help us design these tools in a way that can help meet a diverse set of needs as opposed to us thinking that we can do it ourselves. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It does. I was just wondering if you could kind of provide that in a summary document.
Sure.
Just so for the record, we can kind of give you credit for a lot of the stuff that you are doing.
Yeah, we were
because it wasn't included here, and I know you're doing it.
And we have a lot of projects that we didn't include here. Some of them that are happening, and like I said, the last several years we were here talking about infrastructure. You're going to see a lot more work about applications, and some of those applications will be internal to the city, but others will be externally facing. That just puts us in a new ballgame. If you recall, when we put our new payment system into production, we were getting, and we weren't used to this, we're getting feedback from council members, obscure websites that might point something out, Reddit, people were just, hitting us with all kinds of stuff, things that we had to respond to. But what we've learned from that is that when we go live with these public-facing systems, we need to have a certain structure in place to take all of these different inputs, triage them, and be able to communicate outward to multiple stakeholders such that we do not, people know who's on first, who's on second, and so on. And we've actually been inserted ourselves into the DPW billing project for that same reason. Because we said, we've learned from this, let's make sure we don't do these things moving forward by putting something out there. And you're gonna have problems, you're gonna have issues, but it's how you respond to problems and how do you communicate. And we've learned a lot from that. And we can put something together to put that on the record. Good question, thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Jolin?
Thank you for your presentation. I'm an often user of Open Baltimore, so thank you for having that readily available to us. My question is about the permitting system.
Okay.
And specifically, is it going to be a complete overhaul of what we currently have, or an update on what user experience or communications on the city side, or maybe a mix of both?
So, good question. I'm framing how I'm going to answer you because that's a loaded one too, So, I have to start with our current permitting system. we're talking HCD permits, right? It is a homegrown system that a very talented individual built and maintained, that only that person knew what was going on within it. That person abruptly left, and there were things that we had to do just to keep it alive. We immediately began to, take the life-saving steps on that system and then look for a new one. The new system will be a complete, up-to-date, modern system. However, with that, it's not a however, but, we have to make sure that we change our business processes to, get the benefits of that said system. Yeah, the system will put us down a certain path. It'll force us some business processes, but we will have to configure others. And so we're working and partnering heavily with HCD. We meet with them on a regular basis. By regular, I'm talking, weekly and bi-weekly. There are many different stakeholders that are involved in the process, have been involved in it, will continue to have that. We know we have to do a better job in communicating and training, so we have a change management team that's focused solely on doing that, not just internally, but for external users as well. So our goal is to, get this done by the end of the year, and I think we can do that. And the transformation will be as much as we have the fortitude to go after. And that's more from a business process. And I would say let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, we get to say a 7 or a 6, it doesn't stop there. You do that, you go live, you begin to understand the system, understand your data, and then you take, continued incremental steps. And that's the process that everyone goes through. And that's the process, we mentioned the Workday go live. That's what Workday went through. Like you put systems in, you don't get to nirvana on day one. It's kind of like running through the fields in slow motion, you get there. That's probably the wrong analogy to use, but hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director. First, I'll say that IT is kind of like the offensive line. Everybody knows it's the most important part of the team, but you only get your name called when you blow it. So
I appreciate the reality check on that.
appreciate you guys. My questions are more about our collective budgeting process than about your specific programming. And you've got the disadvantage of having the shortest budget, which makes it the easiest for me to compare and contrast. And so when I look at when I look at last year's budget, it had exactly 3 things on it. It was the application integration infrastructure, the public safety tech, and the IT infrastructure. And they were both in there at a yearly amount, 1.8 million, 4 million, 1.2 million, evenly across the next 6 years. When I look at this year's budget, we took all those things, we took last year's budget, we pushed it out to 2027. So now all that stuff that we said last year we were funding this year, we're now funding in 2027. And instead, we're funding new things, very important things like the permitting system, which is absolutely critical. The unifier application, which you explained what that is, and the tax modernization, which I can also, you explain the benefits and that affects all of us, and I see the importance. So on the one hand, I also would like to say, I also know that you're responding to the needs of other agencies. I understand that you're not necessarily dictating this or, making these decisions. At the same time, I'm asking, like, so I guess to ask my question in a way that maybe you can answer it. So what happened to the application integration, public safety tech, and IT infrastructure that we're able to defer it to 2027 when last year it was an annual
Okay,
cost?
good question. I think I understand it. I could have, I started answering your question before you asked it, but I would look at that in a couple of ways. Last year, we kind of, one, we're maturing as an organization, and with that maturity becomes our level of granularity into what we want to do and our positioning of what we want to do today versus year 1, 2, or 3. That coupled with all the demand that we see and the priorities that are coming through and our ability to, not only have the resources to execute, but have the leadership to lead all of the work. So that's kind of part one. The second part is those, last year, we kind of put dollars in buckets because of for the lack of a better word, some of the fluidity of projects forming and what it takes to form a project. So to give you an example, the Unifier project took us a year and a half just to get everybody on board to do it. A year and a half. We, for instance, tried to do several things, but, because what we did was a change in the way that we approach projects. Because of, as I mentioned, each of those agencies were ready to implement the same product in different ways. Some were going to use a cloud system, some was going to put it on premise. This is the same system. And then another was just going to kind of just do an upgrade in kind. And so that timing doesn't always match the timing of our planning. And so what we've done is vacillate between the ability to say, here are the buckets and here's how we want to spend money within those buckets, applications and integration, infrastructure, et cetera, versus specific projects. And I think what you're going to see more and more are specific projects. So the third part of that is that we are living within the constraints of the $7 million that we have. And things don't always line up as cleanly as we'd like them to. For instance, on the CAD project, in order for us to do the CAD project at 10 million, we would have to do that over multiple years. Because if we don't get $10 million, and so we have to time it such that we can go from one fiscal year to the next. But even if we do that, it takes a good allocation of the capital that we have allocated to us. So I think we may be one or two more cycles till we get a very cleaner view of not only specific projects in the current year, but the outer years. But part of that depends upon how much money is allocated to us. Because when I first got here, we had the list of here's how much money we think we need in each of the years, and then we were just, at the Hunger Games fighting for dollars just like everyone else, and we didn't get it as much as we thought. So we had to regroup and say, okay, given that we were not going to be able to spend $15, $20 million this year, or $30 million this year to replace or to provide, let's say, an upgrade to the 800 megahertz system or backup to that. So that's why you see the gap between what we said in, the first couple of years versus to kind of where we are now. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what we have had to go through and work through in order to just meet the timing of the planning cycle and the constraints of the planning cycle relative to the demand for IT services and applications.
Thank you very much. So it's in terms of the growth and the increased sophistication of the organization, I certainly see that and under your leadership. So thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. And the idea of the buckets and we can't plan that specifically about how we're going to spend money 3 years from now, but we can broadly kind of categorize where the money needs to be spent, and that's very much the purpose of this process. And my message, first of all, isn't specifically to you. It's us, me trying to get a clearer picture of how the budgeting process is affecting our ability to implement some of this stuff, because I'm hearing the same, asking the same question and hearing the same answer from each of the agency heads. So that's all informative, and so thank you.
Let me just add, so we have what we call our project management office. And one of their primary missions is to really help us fix the problem on our end, where they not only provide the controls around the projects that we do. We meet every week and grill people about your dates and your execution. But they also would do a couple of things, that asset tracking piece that I talked about, and the actual planning multiple years out. But we are only good as the plan, like we know we can't get the dollars, it doesn't make sense to put, we need $30 million when we're only gonna get 7. And that's the struggle. So we'll gladly provide any kind of feedback or show you all in detail what some of our challenges are, because we believe that there's more investment needed in IT. We know the crunch that you all are under in trying to allocate the scarce dollars that we have, but we also recognize that there are benefits that we can achieve through those investments. And if we commit to both the investment as well as achieving the investment, then I think we can do wonders for Baltimore City.
Well, thank you for your work, and thank you for being here. Any last questions for BCIT? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Mr. Secretary, is that it?
That's it. No votes today.
All right, no votes today. Thanks, everyone. Next week,
Next Thursday.
next Thursday, we're back for more presentations, a regular agenda, and then do we vote on CIP also next week, or is that?
No.
February 22nd.
Okay.
Between next week and February 22nd, we'll want to find a way to communicate feedback that you all have based on what you've heard, things you might like us to consider and make some recommendations. We can do it by email, or we can come to a briefing session, but think about what you might prefer. I don't know that you have a session.
Thank you.